Hey y'all, it's Kristen. Welcome to the Tribe Podcast. Tribe is a resource podcast for entrepreneurs looking to build their entrepreneurial tribe. Over my years of working with business owners, I've realized that it's important to know who you need as a part of your network before you need them. Listen in as I ask my trusted resources the question you've always wanted answers to but didn't want to pay to get. If you're new to your business or you're established and you're just busy, feel free to borrow my tribe as you build your empire. Drum roll, please. This is by far the most anticipated episode we're doing. Today we're going to chat with Maryam Safari of the Safari firm about, family law, but more specifically prenups, postnups, and how to ask for one. Let's get into it. Hello, Maryam Safari. How are you?
Hi, I'm doing great. How are you?
Good. I'm super excited to talk to you. You already know why. We're going to fill them in a minute.
Yes, I'm very excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Sure. So before we jump in, can you tell us a little bit about you and your business and why you decided to become an attorney, maybe?
Yes. So I am the founder of Safari Law Firm, and it is a civil litigation and family law firm. And I actually decided to become an attorney way back when I was 12 years old. It was a goal that I had in mind, and it never really wavered from that throughout high school and college. And so I went to law school. I clerked for a firm during law school, got a job with them once I graduated. And last year I decided to go out on my own and start Safari Law Firm.
That's awesome. Why did you decide that you wanted to go out on your own? Can we talk about that really briefly?
Yes. So I wanted more flexibility as far as the areas that I practiced in and the clients that I worked with. And it was just something that made sense for me at that point in my life. Being self-employed was a goal that I always had in mind. And so it was great to kind of be able to merge my passion for being an attorney and representing people, as well as owning a small business and being an entrepreneur.
Cool. Yeah, I find that we had another attorney on this show. I'm not sure if her episode will air before or after yours, but that idea of flexibility and how you work with clients seems to be really important.
Mm-hmm. Being on my own has really allowed me to take a bigger picture approach with my clients. And instead of just kind of focusing on the one matter that they come to me with, I tend to ask a lot more questions about their business or their finances or their lives. And it's kind of given me more of a depth of perspective in how I deal with them.
Got it. So I have been dying to talk to you about this because I feel like I might be net neutral in my practice between weddings and divorces this year. It feels like it's about the same every year. And we had breakfast and sort of talked about like the types of business owners I work with are often female. Usually they're the primary income earner and they own a business. And they either in the process when I talk to them of some sort of major life change, either getting married or divorced or dealing with some other major issue in life. And so we talked about how hard it is for people to even discuss or fathom prenups. So we're talking about prenups today. So I'm super excited to hear what you have to say about like why they're important and who should have one.
I think there is a misconception when it comes to prenups that they are documents that are unfair or one-sided, but they really don't have to be. Prenups are basically a contract, so the terms of the contract can be customized depending on what the parties want. The reason it's really important to have a prenup, especially if you own a business, is it will really help minimize the expense in the event of divorce. If you do get a divorce and you have a business, you will likely spend thousands, if not tens of thousands of dollars hiring expert CPAs and other types of experts to come in and put a valuation on your business, which is not a very simple thing to do. Whereas if you have a prenup, a lot of those expenses can be minimized and a lot of that can be dealt with ahead of time.
So what would you say to someone who would say, I'm assuming you hear this all the time, I'm not planning to get divorced, so why would I need to get a prenup?
Well, unfortunately, divorce is one of those things that, nobody gets married thinking that they're going to get divorced. Nobody plans on it, right?
Mhm.
So, and it's kind of similar to what I hear when people don't want to make a will, for example. And of course,
Yeah.
everybody knows that we are all going to pass on someday, but it's one of those things that you don't really want to think about until it happens. So I would say, think of it like an insurance policy. Hopefully you will never need it.
Hmm.
But when you need it, that's exactly the time when you don't want to be thinking about those things. If you're going through a divorce, it's already going to be a very traumatic time in your life. And the last thing you want to do is go over financial documents and income tax returns and argue with attorneys and CPAs about what, things are worth. So it can be something that you get into and you sign and you put in a drawer and hopefully never need to look at it. But when you do need it, that's exactly when you don't want to be answering those questions and you don't want to be thinking about those things.
Yeah, I experience that a lot because of my business or my practice, of course. I talk to people about things they don't want to talk about, like death and divorce and
Right.
disability and that kind of stuff. What's the best way to bring up a conversation? Maybe you just got engaged and you feel like it's a conversation you want to have, but you're worried about the other person's feelings. How do you talk about that?
I would say the best way to bring up a prenup is early. The situations that I see where people are most angry about how a prenup was presented is when it was a week before the wedding or last minute after all the invitations have been sent out and all the planning has been done. That tends to put a lot of animosity and bitterness into the whole process.
Hmm.
Bring it up as early as possible, hopefully before you have announced the wedding, before you have sent out all your invitations.
Hmm.
And that would be my advice. Bring it up as early as possible. And that gives everybody enough time to negotiate the prenup, to make sure that the terms are something that both parties can agree to. And it's not something that's kind of forced on one party at the last minute.
Yeah, and I think there's one thing that people might be able to do is just say, hey, I'm meeting with my attorney, and the other attorney I talked to recently said everything gets blamed on her. Things get blamed on me all the time. And they can say, hey, the attorney thought we should talk about, X, Y, Z. For my clients, I would just put that on the list and say, I would like have the conversation for them with both of them in the room, just kind of tee it up so that they can talk about it. And that way it's not anybody's fault that it came up.
Right,
Yeah,
exactly. And that's something that I tell my clients all the time, whether I'm doing a prenup, a contract, or whether we're already in litigation. Make me the bad guy. If you're trying to protect your own interests, but you don't want to come across as being selfish or making the other party angry, blame it on the attorney. And here's one other thing I will say. It's always uncomfortable to talk about money, but studies have been done that show that disagreements over money, if not being the number one cause of divorce, it's definitely in the top 3. So if you're avoiding that conversation about how you're going to manage finances and what's going to be joint and what's not going to be, then all you're doing is delaying that conversation. That's not something that you can avoid having forever. So it's better to do it before you're married, when you still can kind of talk through it and have other options, than waiting until it's too late.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So I think one other thing too that you might want to pull into that conversation is, hey, like this is, if you're in a partnership, your partner should be demanding that you have either a buy-sell agreement that separates out the spouse in the event that something happens to one of the partners, or a prenup so that the spouse, if one of the partners dies or if you get a divorce, that the business isn't on the table as an asset that the spouse is trying to get. Does that make sense?
That makes
I'm sure you can
perfect
say that
sense.
better.
And that's exactly why prenups are most important for people who own a business, especially if they have other partners in the business. Because if you do go through a divorce, not only are you going to have to spend a lot of money fighting over what exactly the business is worth, but at the same time, the experts and the attorneys will want to go through every piece of document related to what your revenue is, what your expenses are, who your clients are. A lot of times they'll argue over things that may or may not be confidential or trade secrets in your business. So that's definitely not something that your partners are going to be okay with, or that's going to, cause any kind of stability for your business.
Got it. So what if you have a business now and you're married currently and you're thinking, I've wanted to bring this up with my spouse for a while, or the partners have been leaning on me to bring this up. What advice would you give them? What can they do if they're married already?
So actually in Texas, we also have postmarital agreements, which are similar to prenups, but they are for after you're married. And actually what you can do with a postmarital agreement is a little bit more than what you can do with a prenuptial agreement. So it's never too late to have that conversation. If you are already married and you already own a business, or you're thinking of starting a business, you can still get into an agreement that specifies who has the right to control and make decisions of that separate property. Is it separate property? Is it community property? And what will happen in the event of divorce? And that way you can negotiate those terms ahead of time. For example, one of the things we don't have in Texas is alimony. But you can agree to have alimony in the event of divorce in a prenup or in a postmarital agreement. So that can be a negotiating tool. If one party wants to start a business and make that separate property, you might be able to negotiate and say, well, in that event, I would like alimony in order to offset that property that will be only yours. So you can negotiate those things ahead of time. Even after you're married, you can get into a postmarital agreement.
I'm getting staticky again. So anything else about your practice that you think people should know, or other problems that you commonly help business owners solve?
Yeah, so my practice, again, I do both civil litigation and family law. So primarily I handle litigation matters and am in the courtroom. And so a lot of times when I'm helping people with non-litigation issues, I can kind of talk to them about, well, in the event that this goes to litigation, here's what you can expect and here's what we're trying to avoid. So I think that brings an extra perspective to helping people with things like premarital and postmarital agreements, or even just contracts that they need for their business. Other than that, I don't know what kind of thing you're asking about as far as what I help people with.
No, just like if there's anything else you want to talk about that your business does.
Can't really think of anything right now.
Okay, no, that's fine. So we're at the favorite part of the show, my favorite part so far. Well, I ask you to tell us a story, and it can be a client story, a funny story, a personal story about what you did last weekend, or your just favorite story to tell. Do you have something in mind for us?
Well, all of my stories about my clients are confidential, but one thing I would like to share with you is while I was in law school, I always heard about these cases from other states where people were fighting over custody of their pets. And I never thought that I would have a pet custody case, but recently I did finally have a case where a married couple was fighting over who gets to keep the pets and how they get to divide up the pets. And one thing I'd like to share with listeners is in Texas, pets are property, just like furniture or any other property like that. So they get divided just like property, and there's an analysis of whether they're community property, or if the pet was owned by one party before the marriage, then in that case, they would be separate property. And once they're divided, there is no way to have visitation or anything like that. So I know in some other states, that's not the case, but that's one thing that people who are pet owners and find that especially difficult need to kind of be aware of, is that in Texas, pets are considered personal property.
This is really tragic. It's very I'm sad.
I agree.
I'm sad
I know people who only go through breakups and still want time with their pet and want to, have a schedule for when one of them has the pets and things like that.
Man, the last guy I dated, when we broke up, he went and got a puppy. And luckily, he and I are still good enough friends that he let me babysit the puppy sometimes. I was like, look, I know it's over, but he's really
Yeah. I actually had a friend who was engaged and they owned a cat together. And then she called off the engagement and because she was the one who called it off, he thought it would be fair that he gets to keep their cat. And they were neighbors for quite a while after they broke up. And so she would kind of walk past his apartment and see the cat in the window from time to time, and it would just break her heart. So that's one thing that can be really tough too, when sometimes parties don't have children, but they consider their pets like their children, or even if they do have children and the pets are a part of the family.
Man, I feel like we need another story, because now I feel like we're walking around the park like, do you know if you get divorced, only one of you gets to keep the dog?
Right.
I'm telling everyone I know this, by the way. Well,
it's good to know ahead of time. And again, that's something that can be addressed in a premarital agreement.
So if someone's been listening to this and they think, hey, I'd really like more information, or I'm curious and think I might need to get a prenup or a postnup, what's the best way for people to get a hold of you?
The best way is through my email address, Maryam@safarilawfirm.com, or they can visit the website, safarilawfirm.com. And we also have a Facebook page, Safari Law Firm, on Facebook.
Awesome. This has been really great information. Thank you so much for your time and for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for hanging out with us, and I appreciate you listening to this episode. I would love to get some great feedback from you. Feel free to leave me a 5-star review on whatever podcast platform you're listening to this on. Also, any ideas or want to follow up on anything that happened in this episode, I would love to receive your emails. You can email me at kristen@ashtoncharles.co. Otherwise, I hope this episode has helped you be great in your business.